You hear people talk about tutorial hell, getting too comfortable having your hand held basically through tutorials and not building enough things on your own. And I definitely fell into that trap. Indie hacker does have to have those resourcefulness. Like you have to be able to work with what you have, start where you are with what you have, and just go.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. In this episode, we had Logan Koshenka come back on the show. Logan is an iOS developer at Spotify and also an indie developer. We spoke about indie development, some few projects he's working on, and the mindset it takes to become a developer. I hope you enjoy. So I was going through your YouTube channel and I saw one of your recent videos, and you were talking about becoming a developer. And it sparked an interesting thought, which was, do you think that becoming a developer is more of a mindset thing or a smarts thing? Like, what do you think? Which would you weigh as more important if somebody wants to become a developer?
I think there's like a threshold of, not a threshold. I feel like there may be like a minimum level of ability to begin with, but I would say that mindset's probably more important. Like, I think for me, it was at least like, I like to think that I'm pretty resourceful and that I can figure things out. And that sort of led me on this journey of like teaching myself how to code. So if I hadn't had that mindset of like, I can figure this out and I will eventually be good at this, then I probably never would have gotten started because, you know, you encounter your first like bug or confusing tutorial and you're kind of like, what is going on here? So I think mindset, like the ultimate formula would be a confident, you know, smart, like resourceful person that has this mentality of like, I'm going to figure this out. And I may not get it in the beginning, but I'll be better tomorrow than I was today. And then, you know, zoomed out over a long enough period of time, that person becomes really good at anything. But coding is, coding, I feel like is a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts because I even reflecting on my journey and the times I tried to learn to code. Because I had previously before, like the last time when I officially like became a developer or whatever, I had tried to learn before, but I would say my mindset wasn't as sharp or resilient. And of course, you always run into roadblocks while you're coding, but also there's also like life, right? Like life is happening at the same time as maybe you're trying to learn. So if something happens in that regards, like in that aspect, then that may affect how you feel about learning and becoming a developer. Like it might put you down.
I agree. I think too about like how lucky I was to have a laptop. Like I remember when I was in college, I would see people like you see people using the library's computers to get work done. And I remember there was like I remember having at least one or three like big iMacs at my college's library, and it was kind of reserved for like a specific area like design or something. But I remember seeing someone like coding on it, and at the time I was learning how to code, but I had my own MacBook Pro, and I thought like, oh, this person's probably like using GitHub or something and just coding any chance they get, whereas I can take this thing with me. So I feel like that's something that's probably easy to take for granted of like, oh, I have a Mac, or whether you're coding on like playgrounds on an iPad to learn, like you can go pretty far with that to begin. Like, yeah. And if you have that mentality of like, oh, I have this old slow computer, but I'm still going to figure out how to code on it until I can afford something better. Like, I feel like it just comes down to you know, like putting in the time to do it. But like you said, like life gets in the way too. Like if you have things going on, like you may have to wake up earlier, you may have to stay up later to find the time to build that habit.
And was there anything in particular that helped you with like keeping that mindset while you were learning?
I think for me, you hear people talk about tutorial hell, which is like getting too comfortable having your hand held basically through tutorials and not building enough things on your own. And I definitely fell into that trap. But to answer your question, at the end of a tutorial, you have something that you built. Someone may have showed you how to build it along every step of the way, but you still built it. You know what I mean? So as long as you're not discounting yourself saying like, oh, someone showed me how to do it, so it doesn't count, because that's not true. You did it. Like it counts. And who cares if you needed help? You're learning. Um, Having that result at the end, having that thing where you go, oh, I built this. Like, look how cool. Like, it's a tip calculator or a to-do list. Like, that for me was kind of the staircase where it's like, oh, what can I build next? And then it's like, oh, this one's a little more complex. This one's a little more complex. And then you do 10 tutorials, and then 8 of them has this similar pattern. And then now over those reps, you're like, oh, I know how to do this pattern. And
Yep.
then at that point, you're kind of like, oh, I could do this on my own. Like for me, that was like table views and like self-erode index path and UI kit. Like that was
Yeah.
the common theme when I was working with table views. And then that became very like second nature for me. So I was very comfortable with table views in the beginning because a lot of tutorials would have them. So yeah, I think it's a lot of reps. And I think having small goals of like, the goal could even be like finish a tutorial. And then once you do that, that's sort of the feedback that you're wanting and like the small steps to leveling up.
Yeah, that's a great advice because it's a big task and like becoming a developer,
Yeah.
and that kind of helps you break it down like one step at a time. You're not worried about, oh, I need to know how to create the Instagram or something.
Right. Right. And then even if that was the goal, like do a few simple things. Like I said, if you do 10 tutorials for different kinds of things, but like you could probably find that now. Like if you wanted to be like, how would you build Instagram? And if you have like the mentality that we talked about of like, I could figure this out, you could at least follow a tutorial that's like, hey, let's build an Instagram clone in Swift UI. Like I've seen, if not that, like similar things where once again, who cares if you have to follow someone's lead? Like you would still end up building Instagram. And then at the end of that, you would have your own project and you would have like all of these things that you learned along the way and probably inspiration for the next thing. The inspiration of like, oh, what if we could make it like this? And, I feel like getting more and more complex with the tutorials you do, like gives you that confidence to be like, okay, maybe I could change this. Like I've seen this before. What if we built an app that was different in this way? Like that's what was like addicting for me, I think.
Yeah, the way I tried to approach it was I tried to like I'd have my personal projects that I was working on the side, and I
Mm-hmm.
would think, oh, I need to learn this part. Like for example, I need to know how to set up a back end or user authentication. So I would try to find videos or apps or maybe even a course that's doing that
Yeah.
so that I could learn and like implement that on
Yeah.
my own project. But I would go
Yeah.
through and like build out whatever they did to at least have my own to at least have experience in doing it before. Even
Mm-hmm.
as you said, like they were holding your hand. But then the real challenge is when I go back to my own project and try to do it right there.
Yeah. And like I still do that now. Like the stuff that I build, like if I'm unfamiliar with something, like I'll do a tutorial first and then get a feel for it and then try to implement it. It may work, it may not. And if it doesn't, it's kind of like, all right, where did I mess this up? And then having other people's code to use as reference is huge. Like that's like the number one way to figure things out. You know what I mean? Like, um, so yeah, I'm still a huge fan of tutorials. I just think like the sooner that you can venture off in the beginning and be like, you know, even if it is a to-do list, it's like I would challenge people and say like, how could you make your own version of this differently? And then they have the context of the to-do list. Even something that simple, you could make it, you know, reversed order, and you can make so that when you cross something off or fill the checkbox, that it could remove it from the, like all these different little things that you can experiment with on your own, and then ends up with like, oh, maybe I do have my own idea here.
Now I wanted to transition into more the indie side. I saw that you recently released a project, right?
Yes. Yeah, finally.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I released a sunlight tracking app called Riseroo. So I'm a huge fan of the Huberman Lab podcast, and something he talks about a lot is getting morning sunlight. So I started doing it, felt like a good difference in my sleep and my mood, and made it like a habit. But the interesting thing is you need more sunlight on the days that it's like cloudy and overcast. And the ranges that he talks about are kind of broad, like on purpose, because he's like, you know, you may need 20 to 30 minutes on those days. And on like a clear sunny morning where you're getting like direct sunlight, it may be as little as like 5 minutes. So I built an app that allows users to use their iPhone camera to kind of measure that light amount, and then using an algorithm, it gives you like an optimized sunlight viewing time where users can basically start a timer and say like, okay, today I need 8 minutes based off of the weather, the time of day, and the light amount. So, so yeah, it allows people to kind of track that habit. And then from there, they're given like insights. You can have like milestones and streaks to kind of make it fun and gamify it. But yeah, it's the first app that I've launched since like 2019, and it feels really good to be like back in the game, I feel like. And yeah, I just want to release more and more. So I think there's a quote, I think it's Rick Rubin, that's like finish this project in service of the next one, that I think is super cool, of like, don't get too attached to one thing where it's like, cool, we did this, it's great, you put something out into the world, now what's next? Like, regardless of if it's like a, you know, average app, major success, major failure, whatever it may be, it's like, I feel like shipping itself is, that just feels good.
Yeah, and what's like the biggest takeaway you have from that break of not releasing since 2019? Like, what was the biggest difference you saw?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm pretty ambitious, and like you said earlier, like life tends to get in the way of these things. So a lot of times I would kick myself of like, I haven't released anything, like I'm wasting my time, like I have this skill, I need to be using it, and kind of like being hard on myself because I hadn't released anything in the past like 4 years. But what I didn't realize was I was just sitting back and observing, like active on social media, following people in tech, you know, learning more. My development skills are so much better now. But I think what happened was I developed way more of a filter for my ideas. I learned just through observing and reading and like playing with apps and going back through my old ideas, that like the ideas that I'm choosing to build now, I feel like all have at least some chance of many users enjoying it, whether it's not even thinking about financially being successful, but just like, will this help people? Will people enjoy using this? Will this provide value to people? I think, like, for lack of better terms, I feel like a lot of ideas that I used to want to build were like, ugh, like that would be a nightmare to build, or this would, like, no one would want to use this. So I think I developed like a very improved filter to put my ideas through.
So the bar raised.
Yeah, I like to think that, at least, like, hopefully that's the case. But I have a lot of other ideas that, like, I'm already working on the next thing, and you know, I do think that they're providing value in some way, whereas before I didn't spend as much time on the idea part, where I'm just like, oh, that would be cool, I'm going to start building it, without really considering the big picture of, like, you know, how to market it, or
Like,
how it would work brand wise.
do you think about, like, the question, is there a market for it?
Yeah, I do.
Or
And
one
I think
question.
about, like, what kind of person would use it. And there's a strategy um talked about on YouTube, where you can basically, for your YouTube videos, where you can basically create like fake avatars of who is watching your video. I do the same thing now, but with my apps, where it's like, you give them a name, give them an age, you give them a city to live in, you give
Oh,
them hobbies, and then you say, like, where does my app fit in here? And like I said, I saw it for the first time with YouTube videos. It's similar to like user stories and
well,
in
I think they
tech.
do it a lot in business.
Yeah.
In business, like, they try to have, like, they call it an avatar, as you said, which is
Yeah.
basically like your dream customer or the ideal customer.
Yeah, like really personifying your target market. Um so yeah, just things like that, where I really consider, like, who's using this and why, and would they use it more than once? It's a big part of it. Like, getting people to download your app is one thing, but retention is another. Um, and then, looking into like keywords, and what I think the big thing about Riser Room, my Sunlight app, is like, I feel like I'm early. I feel like it's intermittent fasting 2.0, where it's something that more and more people will be doing. And I feel like I'm early on this trend, which I may or may not be, but like, the keywords on the App Store, I saw an opportunity for something that didn't really exist yet. So just like, I never would have thought in this way before. I feel like I've matured in that way, in terms of like choosing what to work on, because I feel like it's arguably one of the most important things, as opposed to just working hard with your head down without really considering what factors go into it. Now I'm looking at the big picture. I'm zooming out and saying, why would this work? Why would people download this? How much would it cost? Is there a business model here? Is there a name for this? Is there a keyword? Like, is this super competitive? Like, I had an idea for like a habits app, but that is jam packed with competitors. So like, I don't know if I'm going to build it.
Yeah.
I have other things that I feel like are more exciting at the time. So yeah, just, I feel like it's kind of maturity and experience, but also just a lot of like observations that I've been able to learn from.
Do you have any particular influences, like books or videos or things that influenced you into that sort of thinking?
Honestly, it's probably Twitter the most. Like, just following like-minded people, which for me is like tech and startups and software engineers and
Like the indie
indie
dev?
indie dev. Yeah, like indiehackers.com is another great one. Like Product Hunt. Like, you can see, but I do feel like for me, Twitter is the number one, because I'm there to hang out. I'm there like to kill time, and I'm like passively looking through, and then I'll just randomly see like someone launched this app, and I'm like, oh, cool. And then I'll download their app, and then I follow that person. And then they share, a month later, like, I made a TikTok about my new app and I got 10,000 downloads. And I'm like, oh, there's TikTok. That's an idea. Like if you can make content around your app. So just that over that period of like 4 years since and even before then too, it was happening, but just following these people and interacting with these people, and then maybe you form a relationship with these people and ask them some questions, and like that accumulates, and then you kind of see what works, you kind of see what doesn't. And newsletters are another good resource, I feel like, to have like newsletters to learn from, in terms of there's one that just covers how businesses got their first 1,000 users, and it's fascinating. Like that's one of my favorite ones. So yeah, just things like that. I feel like observing has helped me more than I realized. So I've learned to be a little easier on myself, but at the same time, like I do feel like I want to make up for lost time and launch like apps very regularly now.
And what would you say is like the skill stack of an indie developer? Because
oh man,
if it's just like a solo like indie developer, that's a very big skill stack, right?
Yeah. So I think it could kind of funnel down, right? It can kind of you have to be able to build something, and you have to be able to market something. So like that could come in many ways. Like for me, I am an iOS engineer that loves storytelling and like in the form of video. But maybe someone's shy and they don't want to be on camera. Like you can write all day about the things that you build and build a huge following. You could write a newsletter, you can write blog posts, you can tweet, you can just take a picture of like a laptop and say something on Instagram about how you coded, like how you were writing code all day. And like there's so many different ways to do it. You may be someone who's more into marketing than you're into building, and maybe the product you build is more of like a no code, like newsletter business or whatever it may be. I feel like indie hackers, I do feel like something I touched on earlier, that an indie hacker does have to have those resourcefulness. Like you have to be able to work with what you have, start where you are with what you have, and just go. So that skill stack specifically can be, a lot of different coding languages, a lot of different ways to market things, a lot of different, opinions and skills. But at the very top level, it's like, are you putting things out there? Are you working? And are you resourceful? Are you finding like tools and frameworks and libraries to make your process the best it can be?
Yeah. And I would say, like, from my observations, like, I think it's important to, well, assuming you want, like, an indie hacker wants to do this, like, solo.
Yeah.
To, like, learn more about business and marketing and sales. Because if you build it, like, they won't come, right? Because the saying is just build it and they'll come.
Yeah.
But you'll soon find that, like, if you build it and you don't market or tell anybody, then nobody will come. Even if you build like the best thing, I would say, like you can build like the greatest invention of all time, but if no one knows about it,
yeah, 100%. And I feel like the ideas that are so good that everyone runs and tells their friends about it are so rare. So like, unless it's that, less than 1% case where you're like giving mind-blowing value to people for like a great cost and they're like, you have to download this app, then yeah, if you build it, they're not going to come. So it comes down to like little tactics of like, okay, are you offering a free month if you refer a friend? Like that's like a good referral program is one way to grow. Or, do you have a marketing budget to run app store ads? Or like, do you have a content strategy? Are you sharing this journey online in some way? Like, do you have charisma to tell a good story about your product? Yeah, I agree completely. Like you have to, I think there are a lot of different avenues to go, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there are a lot.
if there's a goal of turning this into like a self-sustaining business, then yeah, you have to learn that side of it too. And it's interesting because some people come from that side and some people come from the complete opposite side. Some people just want to build and some people already have that business acumen coming into it and they're like, I have to figure out how to build things. So that's where indie hacking is like this fun, um, like melting pot of all different kinds
Yeah,
of
like
people where it's like, yeah,
yeah, I think something good too, because you don't have to do it all by yourself. So teaming up with somebody, yeah, just teaming up would be
yeah,
really, really helpful. Especially like if you just love to build, then finding somebody who's really good at marketing or sales can really help.
yeah, definitely,
And
for sure.
I'd recommend a book called Blue Ocean Strategies. It's a business book, but it talks about creating blue oceans, which is basically like creating a new market. Because, for example, the App Store and like the app marketplace is very competitive. Like almost all apps have been built in a way.
Yeah,
Not all apps, but
no, I know what you mean.
there's like no new innovation happening. And the book kind of talks about how you can create a blue ocean, aka like a new innovation, and that's something that I think could be really helpful for indie developers.
Definitely.
And have you ever checked out Naval's work, by the way?
Yeah, yeah. I have his book, the Almanac book.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting. Like, there's so many good takeaways.
If somebody's thinking about becoming an indie developer, like maybe they or like not becoming, but if they're thinking about building something, like they're working as a developer already, and they're thinking about like maybe having a side project that's might sustain them in the future, then they should check out Naval's work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think my like a huge inspiration for me, and there's so many people on Twitter now. Like Twitter is kind of my space to follow these people the most, I feel like, because it's becoming more and more popular. Like share your indie developer journey, and I find new people all the time. But Peter Levels is kind of the big one for me, where it's kind of no fluff with him. It's very like metric updates and hey, I updated my website. And um on his blog like years ago he did, I'm going to launch 12 startups in 12 months, and then I think like the eighth one became uh like a success, so he sort of stopped doing that and worked more on that, and now he has this portfolio of projects that are like very successful. And he's awesome. And he kind of just, like I said, no fluff, just straight to the point. Like updated this, had trouble with this, made this much money. So that's someone that's inspiring for me, because it's like you can tell that he's putting in the work every single day. He's coding every day and updating several projects at once and maintaining these projects, and then like launching a new one every once in a while, which is, it's awesome. So yeah, Peter Levels is, if I had to pick another person
Does
to
he
look up to in the space.
does he have like a newsletter, or is it just based off his tweets alone?
I'm not sure if he has a newsletter. I don't think, but for me, yeah, it's following him on Twitter.
So for your indie project, is that something you're looking to do in terms of just shipping, like just keep on shooting, basically like a volume shooter, and
Yeah,
like of course iterating and improving upon that?
yeah, I have so many ideas, and I think my strategy as of now, and it like I think about these things a lot, so it's very fluctuating, I guess, but I think something that would be very cool would be to launch a lot of smaller projects in their simplest form, like an MVP, and tell the story behind it and put them out into the world. Monthly would be ideal, but that's pretty aggressive. So like maybe it's not monthly, but I would love for it to be monthly or at least close to monthly. And then do that for a while, get in the habit of shipping. You have reusable code that just builds and builds and builds that you can build more and more. And then from there, like say at a certain point, I think it would be cool to then go, okay, I'm going to ship once a quarter, but larger projects and take like bigger bets
Ah, yeah.
based off of what you've learned from, your previous projects. So, not to mention, there's a chance that one of the small ones takes off and people are like, this is great. Can you add this? And then you're like, okay, I'm onto something here. And that becomes, something. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to just ship, 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 ship for a while and slowly go, okay, I have a bigger idea that's going to take a little longer, and I'm going to put, some more money behind this one, some more effort behind this one, and then maybe you ship less frequently but take bigger bets that, may or may not pay off bigger. So as of now, to answer your question, yeah, I would love, and I plan on releasing more projects more regularly. And yeah, I think it would be cool after a while to kind of really take big swings and say, okay, based off of what we learned from the last 13 apps that we've built, what can we do that's bigger than this, that could be, a legitimate business? And because right now it's fun, right? Right now it's kind of like, oh, this could be cool. And I do think like the ideas that I'm building have a chance, but at the same time, it's not an expectation for me. It's just kind of like I'm enjoying the process of just building and shipping right now. So um, it's fun, and I don't want to lose that fun aspect. But it is more exciting if you're like, oh, this could impact 1 million people, and you're like, all right, what gives us a legitimate shot to impact 1 million people? And then trying to do that and seeing what happens. It's like, you never know if you don't try.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's an I just released a indie project as well, and I still haven't decided if I want to take that route in terms of like work on the next one or perfect this one.
Yeah, it's a tough. I'm kind of in the same boat. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's tough to see. Is there something here? And then I feel like too, you could always, as long as you're not experiencing like crashes, and as long as your bases are covered, um, I think for Riseru, for me, like, I definitely want to move on to the next thing. But as far as how much time I'm putting into Riseru, like, I'm gonna wait a month and see like what the initial wave looks like, and what that organic traffic looks like, and then maybe push it a little more in a month and see and talk to some users, get some feedback, and then kind of go from there. But I don't think it has to be necessarily one or the other. Like, you could always add a feature here or there, or change this here or there, rather than just starting a bunch of new projects too.
Yeah. I think something important that you said is like talking to customers and
Yeah,
like doing I would put that underneath like market research,
yeah, for sure.
just to see like, do people actually want this? Do they like it? And what do they like about it? And those are questions I ask myself too. And those are really helpful, especially if you're deciding whether to put more time into this or to move on to the next one.
Yeah, if I've learned anything from like the startup world, it's like talk to your users. And uh, a fun test I like to do is the parent test with my parents. I'll like let them use the app that I'm working on, and then like watch them over their shoulder. Like, can my mom figure out how to use this? And what is she clicking? And what questions does she have? And if something's unclear, that like you may uncover something that you may have not have known before. Like it's tough sometimes when you're close to it. Like even if you're making a song
Yep.
or a movie or a YouTube video or writing a book or whatever the creative endeavor is, like if you're very, very, very involved and very, very, very close up, a lot of times it's tough to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's just discovering this thing, the viewer, the user, the listener, whatever it may be. So um, it's good to get honest feedback. Like I always lead with like, I send the app to my friends, I send my YouTube videos to my friends, and I'm like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. What do you think? And like, be
That's true.
honest. Yeah.
I feel like that's really good, but I feel like they never are brutally honest though. I feel like,
Yeah,
right?
you'll notice if you ask enough, you'll notice who you can count on, because like I say you're not going to hurt my feelings, but like a little bit of the ego could get hurt in that process. And then,
Oh, the ego's gonna get hurt regardless. Like it's gonna get hurt, but you have to like
yeah,
not
but then it
you have to
helps you
let it go.
identify, yeah, and it helps you identify like the real ones that are like, all right, like, here we go. And then your buddy's like, why would you have this on here? This is like pointless. I'm never going to use this part. And you're like, oh, all right. Well, I told him to be honest. And
Yeah,
then it's like, okay, cool. So if this person likes it, it's legit. So honesty is like, yeah, it could be tough to find in that scenario because the people close to you don't want to hurt you, but it's important. And when you do identify someone that is brutally honest about your project, whatever it is, then it's important. I feel like the goal then becomes, all right, let's get them to like it. Because if they, if they give me their feedback that they love it, then I know they're telling me the truth and I know that like it's improved. So yeah, shout out to the honest,
yeah.
real ones there.
Or you could just throw it on Twitter and somebody will yell at you.
Yeah, a stranger is definitely not afraid to hurt your feelings. Or Reddit,
Yeah, yeah, I read it.
drop it in a subreddit.
Have you posted there?
I dropped Riseru in the Huberman Lab subreddit, thinking like these are exactly the people, and yeah, it got ripped apart and I got made fun of. But it is what it is. That comes with the territory. But yeah, there's so many places like even that we don't know about that are, if you just dig, smaller sites. Facebook groups is another good one. We mentioned TikTok earlier, like that
Oh, and
algorithm just tends to find people like, so
I think one thing important too is to think about who the ideal user is and where do they hang out.
exactly. Yeah.
That'll give you the most bang for your buck in terms of time and even if you run ads or whatever.
100%.
How do you feel about like Twitter's rebrand? Like X now, right?
For me, it's more like, you know how Facebook rebranded into Meta?
Yeah.
And I know Facebook still exists, like the website and the app Facebook exists, but everyone still calls it Facebook. So I feel like when we refer to it, it's going to take a long time for people to start calling it X. I'm not going to sit here and bet against Elon. Like that's not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's more like interesting. It's just interesting. Like,
Yeah, this is crazy. Like whether
I
you
just
love or hate Elon, you have to admire. Like that man spent $44 billion on a company, and he just rebrands it, does
so
whatever he wants.
we talked about, you know, indie developers and building in public and stuff like that. I feel like Elon is like the ultimate build in public. He's tweeting about like metrics are up, like,
Yeah.
and he's responding to people and fixing things, and it's crazy. But no, I'm just curious. Like I feel like that's my reaction of like, ooh, okay, we'll see what happens. And I don't,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not going to bet against him. I don't think it's gonna. I still use Twitter, but I still call it Twitter. So, you know, we'll see.
It's going to be interesting to see where this goes because
Yeah,
we're just seeing this all play out.
yeah, it's crazy, and I'm here for the ride.
Yeah. And did you play around with Threads?
Yeah, I got on there, thought it was cool, and then there's like an interesting dynamic that I was thinking about this yesterday. Everyone just like I feel like most people signed up. Most people that I know got on there, gave it a shot. And then I'm wondering if Twitter initially worked because something like Twitter didn't exist yet. And now that something does exist and there's this critical, like everything's already in place when it comes to Twitter, like there's this critical mass of users, there's all these features, exactly the things that everyone's used to and wants. And then Threads comes along and it's just like a simpler kind of copy of that. And everyone's like, oh, cool. I'm going back to Twitter now. Like, I got on there. I threaded a couple things. I posted a couple things. And I just, my habits, I feel like there's something to be said about user behavior habits where, like, what are you already habitually going to and opening when you wake up in the morning and when you're using your phone, when you're waiting in line somewhere? What are you opening? And for me, one of those is Twitter. And I feel like the effort to build a habit like Threads would have to have something unique that Twitter doesn't have. And what it has now is just feels like it's not enough. Um, at the same time, what do I know? You know, like I'm not an expert by any means, but for me, like it comes down to Threads having something that I can't get anywhere else. And right now, I can get more on Twitter of just these people that I'm interested in sharing their thoughts. Like that's on Twitter for me right now. And Instagram's unique in that way. Like Instagram has that uniqueness. So for Threads, it's kind of like how are they different? How are they going to differentiate themselves? Because this feels like a scenario where just copying isn't enough. Just having a place to post and like and retweet or, you know, repost,
Yeah.
rethread doesn't feel like enough. Because me as a user, I open it and it's kind of like a lesser version of Twitter at this point. It's just simpler. And then you're like, okay, this is neat, I guess. But then the next day when I'm not thinking, when I'm not consciously saying like, I'm going to try this new app Threads, my mind immediately goes back to what I was doing before, which was like opening Twitter and
Yeah.
seeing the people that I'm used to seeing. And yeah, there's not anything that like really, really, really captured me.
Yeah, and I read something recently. I forgot where, but like it pertained to like startup ideas and like apps or websites, and it pertains to like innovation. And it's talked about how like if you want to replace something, you kind of have to be like 10 times better
Yeah.
in order to actually succeed, because you have to break people's like patterns and habits.
Yeah. 100%.
And with something with like a social network where you need network effects, you need to do that like on a big scale.
Right. But at the same time, um, it's funny, I almost tweeted this today and I deleted it because I didn't know how to word it. It's in my drafts. So I guess I didn't delete it. But at the same time, like whether or not Threads works out, I love the fact that Zuck did that. I love the fact that he was like, let's release our own version of, like a Twitter type app, and let's see what happens. And I'm sure more data went into the decision than let's see what happens. But the point is, like, with Elon too, it's so cool to see these founders like taking these big swings and not just playing it safe. Of like, it's so cool to see them risking failure. And
Yeah.
like, I think to like Jeff Bezos talking about all the failures at Amazon, like the fact that there was like an Amazon phone that just fell flat on its face and failed. Like, I love that because it's like when something works, it's going to really, really work. Like if Threads does somehow work, and it's going to be massive. So it's cool for me to see Elon just buying Twitter for 44 billion.
Yeah.
Like being like, should I do it? I'm going to do it. Like, and it's cool to see Zuck. Like, I know people criticize Meta for copying like stories, but it's cool to see them like take a big risk and not be so attached to the safe things like Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp. It's like, all right, what's next? And like even the metaverse thing, it's kind of like,
Yeah,
we'll see, but not yet, but who knows? But like, I
maybe
just
with Vision
love,
Pro,
yeah, I just love
maybe Vision
seeing
Pro will take
founders
that off.
take big bets. You know what I mean? I love seeing this in action. I love the fact that we're trying to innovate, and it's exciting. It's just exciting, the fact that they're going for it.
Yeah, it's cool to see.
What do you
And
think
I
of
mean,
Threads?
what do I think of Threads?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Threads. I think there's a market for it. Because if you think about, like, there's people on Instagram and Facebook that never used Twitter, never even thought about going on Twitter,
Yeah.
and
It's a
now
great
there's this
point.
platform that lets them like integrate their Instagram or bring over their Instagram to Threads,
So,
and they're just playing around with it. I
what do
haven't
you
I haven't used it recently, only like in the beginning, like you said.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how much, like, how's it going in there. But I think there's a lot of people who don't use Twitter and were mostly on Instagram that kind of
Yeah.
found this new thing with Threads that they might be liking.
Yeah, so what do you think? Do you think it's because they're targeting like a younger demographic, which is why they basically made the bridge between Instagram and Threads as opposed to Facebook and Threads? Because Facebook has more of like a posting, like written posts behavior. So I feel like the transition between Facebook, where people a lot of times just write all text posts, the transition from that to Threads would have been, I don't know, less friction than Instagram, which
Yeah.
is like all media
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
text.
I get what you mean.
But it
But
might have been
I
like,
think the
let's,
PR behind Facebook is a big thing, like,
yeah,
cuz Instagram has a cleaner image than Facebook.
yeah.
And like you said, you get the younger crowd with Instagram.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Like them wanting the younger demographic. It's interesting though. Like, I'm not ready to call it a failure yet. Like, I'm like, a ton of people signed up for Threads. So this is where like my marketing mind has some fun, where it's like maybe they start paying people to have like exclusive announcements on Threads, or like maybe so and so is going to make, like maybe an athlete's going to make their big signing decision
on Threads.
Like, remember when LeBron went to the Heat?
Yeah.
Imagine if there was like something of that impact on Threads. Everyone would be like, I need to get on Threads right now. And then just those sorts of things for a long enough time would get more people like opening the app on a regular basis.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to share this with a fellow developer. And if you want to support the show, you guys can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever platform you're listening on. And even consider joining the Patreon. Lastly, check out iosdojo.io if you guys want to level up your skills or have some courses there. Peace.